In today's speech, I will be discussing substance dualism and the idea of it in philosophy. But before I get into it, I want to speak about some of the jargon that is specific to substance dualism. First, we have the mind and body problem. We have two things, the mind and body. The mind can be defined as the soul, this consciousness, or the ability to have mental properties, mental events. The second is the body. This is your brain, your hand, the trees around you, or anything of that sort. It is bound to the physical. We have two trains of thoughts usually. Dualism. This believes in the idea of a mind and a body being separate. A lot of times this is what people believe in with the soul, and it's a lot of times thought as religious. The second we have is materialism. And a lot of science backs this because it is able to be tracked, but is also only bound to the mind. Only bound to the material. The idea that everything comes together through evolution of biology and the world being evolved. The second term we have is substance, and this is what I speak on mostly. The world can be broken down into many substances, although in materialism, it only believes in the material substance. Today, though, I believe there is two, the immaterial and the material. Immaterial meaning the mind, material meaning the body. The last term is properties. Although I won't really be addressing this is a lot of times the opposition to substance dualism. This is the thought that there are multiple properties in the one substance, material. I've spent several weeks studying substance dualism, the ins and outs, and where it came about, and also the opposition to show you an unbiased account. I've also grown up as a Hindu, or a sect of Hinduism, practicing this, and through this I've been able to understand substance dualism as growing up. I believe everyone has had a point where they've questioned the body, what's real, whether this body is mine or not. But it's hard to question their mind. They may question a thought, but they never can question the fact that their thought is theirs because they have been able to think it. Dualism has helped with the ability to have cognition and the ability for neurological scientists to come up with new ideas of how we interact and why we think. Now that you have been able to understand the ins and outs of substance dualism, I want to go into the history of it, why it came about. The classical philosophers Plato and Descartes are the most known for pioneering substance dualism as we know today. Plato believed in the idea of forms, believing that there's eternal forms and that us physical bodies are imperfect copies of that. He believes that the soul transmigrates from body to body and that the knowledge in this world is reminiscence of objects earlier cognized in an intelligible realm of forms. This is spoken in his book, Phaedo, where he has a collection along with Republic going on to his ideas of philosophy. The second and most notable known philosopher for substance dualism is René Descartes. He's known as creating the Cartesian dualism and created real distinction, which is the distinction between the mental and immaterial, or the mental and physical, and it being two different substances. He's quoted on saying, "So I find my only property I can describe myself is thought. So my knowledge of thought is more basic and more certain than my knowledge of corporeal thing." He has said this in his principle of philosophy, and went on to believe that his thought is more certain than the body itself, and went on to challenge this through his beliefs of Christianity and helped work with the church to show that the soul is eternal and will go to heaven. Now that you know some of the history of substance dualism, I want to talk about the fundamentals of it, what it's all about. Substance dualism is the idea, as I said, of mind and body being separate. It is what a lot of people like to believe because the mind is something that is unmeasurable. You can't really measure a thought, how big a dream is, how big of a hope you have, how much willpower you have. But you can measure the brain, you can measure how much it weighs or how big it is, such as you can measure a tree. As these two, they have two different properties. They're almost two different substances. It is though the mind and the body are not on the same plane. One is able to keep going. And in substance dualism, it believes that the mind and body can be separate from each other. The soul continues on even if the body dies and decomposes, just as the body can be on this material world and decompose without the soul itself. But the soul can go into the realm of forms or continue on to another body. Now that you know some of the fundamentals, I want to talk about the opposition. The opposition is that substance dualism doesn't explain how the mind and body interact with each other. How do they work? How do they come together? Although this does not really deny substance dualism, it does make it hard to explain the phenomenon of the two coming together. Substance dualism also relies on the idea of the soul, which is unmeasurable and it can only be theorized on. Aristotle is a known philosopher to go against substance dualism, and is quoted by Hamann as saying, Aristotle certainly believes that the soul of a living thing is dependent for its own existence on the existence of bodily parts arranged in a certain way, believing that biology and evolution is the explanation of the mind, and that it came about to evolve into a superior being. This was said by Hamann in his works, Aristotle, The Mind and Body Problem. Although these don't fully oppose substance dualism as being illegitimate, it does make you question, where is this line in mind and body? Can my mind continue on after this body, or am I truly bound to just this material parts? In conclusion, I think it is important we question our reality. It is important to question our existence and what is around us, what we physically see and what we mentally can think of, and if the two are separate, and to hopefully build our own moral compass. As we all question reality, it's important to think about whether we are looking at the shadows on the wall in the allegory of the cave by Plato, or thinking about the world and seeing it as it really is, not as a shadow. We're lucky to be able to shape these thoughts, whether it's through our soul, biology, or the union of both. Thank you for your time.